Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. This is Have Roots Will Travel, where we explore all kinds of genealogical videos. But over the last several years, I've been focusing my attention on two series, if you will, Les Filles du Roi, Les Filles Mariées. And these are women that are truly the founding mothers of Quebec and New France, and ultimately their descendancy is all throughout North America, as we have clearly seen. So with that being said, we're taking one woman at a time and getting to know her story. Some of these stories are amazing, and some are gentle and kind, and others are very dramatic. I think today's episode is one of those very dramatic ones. So before we begin, though, let's have you, perhaps, if you like, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and also remember those notifications. Those help you actually remember when I post something. They give you a little notification. The most important thing, though, is to subscribe to the channel, and I appreciate any and all of you who have done so thus far. Thank you so much. You have no idea what that one thing can help in the YouTube world. And for those of you inclined, if you want to support the channel, we have a couple of ways. You can do it through the memberships. You can do it through PayPal on my website. And you can also do it through the super thanks that is there, right there on your screen. You can see a super thanks. So have that and check that out if that's something you're inclined to do. And with that being said, let's get started and see our Filles du Roi of this episode. And now we come to Les Filles du Roi, episode 328, Catherine Guichelin. And she comes to us from a viewer request. I did not have her in my files, and it was a fascinating study. So let's get to know Catherine a little bit better. So Catherine would be born in 1653 in a commune called Laon, France. Her parents were Louis Guichelin and Antoinette A. Now she is born in the commune of Laon, which is part of Centre-Val de Loire region, which you can see on the upper left of your screen. And then inside of that region, the département, as it's known, or otherwise known as county, is Aisne. And so this particular commune has a richness of history that is hard to beat. And it's perched kind of on a limestone ridge, and it earned the nickname the Crowned Mountain for the Gothic cathedral that dominates that skyline. Its story actually begins in Roman times when it was known as Lugdunum, an important Gallo-Roman settlement. By the Middle Ages, Laon became a royal city and a strategic stronghold. Charlemagne himself stayed here, and several French kings were crowned within these walls. And the jewel of the city is that Cathedral of Notre Dame, and it is begun construction in the 1150s, and is one of the earliest Gothic cathedrals in France. It's famous for things like its sculptured oxen, honoring the animals that hauled its stone up that steep hill. And of course, Laon has seen its share of turmoil, uprisings and sieges and occupations during the Hundred Years' War and later the Franco-Prussian War, when part of that citadel was destroyed. And today you can really see that medieval quality of it if you should travel. If this is one of your ancestors, certainly you'll be able to experience it in the same way that your ancestor would have as well. Now, she would arrive in New France aboard the ship Le Jean Baptiste on June 30th, 1669. This is after her father's death. Now, we do not have any information as to her dowry that she would have obtained or brought forth, and we do know that she's on that ship, Le Jean Baptiste, on June 30th, 1669. Now, the groom that she would select and who would select her, his name Nicolas Bouteau, and he was born in 1646 on the island Ile de Ré, and the city was Sainte Marie. Now, you can see Ile de Ré is part of the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region. You can see it on the third picture there. If you look to the upper left, you'll see that it is part of the Charente-Maritime region, and those little tiny islands, that's where it is. And really, this particular region of France blends kind of vineyard covered landscapes with true maritime or Atlantic charm. And it was first kind of recorded in the late 12th century and was a parish dedicated to the Virgin Mary. It grew into the island's most populous commune. Its fortified church is called Notre Dame de l'Assomption, and it doubled as a lookout for sailors, while the nearby hamlet of Lannou preserves chapels and old fishing traditions. You can see the coastline is truly marked by extraordinary sandy beaches and ancient stone fish traps and traces of wartime blockhouses from the Atlantic Wall. Today, Sainte Marie thrives on a mix of agriculture, especially vineyards, and potatoes in seaside tourism. Absolutely beautiful. You can see the windmill there as well and the boats. Absolutely wonderful. So Nicolas would have grown up along the sea and would have had that kind of let's see if he takes that with him to New France. It appears that Nicolas did not take those seaside skills along with him. He would arrive in 1665 as an engagé, a contracted worker. And by 1667, we see him in the household of Etienne de Nevers, a very prestigious household. And he is basically a house employee or servant, as you will, based on that. You can see the name circled there. Nicolas Bouteau is how they name him, but it is our Nicolas. Now remember, a contracted employee could not, or agent or person, could not marry for those 3 years. So he had to fulfill his contract, and at the end of the contract, he was told, do you want to go back to France, essentially, or do you want to stay? And if he wanted to stay, he was given the ability to purchase land and that sort of thing. That would have made him eligible to marry a fille du roi. And so let's see that journey. So by 1669, he would have, fulfilled his contract and would have been ready to marry, would have had a house, would have had some kind of foundation or background to be able to actually even, choose a fille du roi. And he chooses Catherine, and she chose him. And on October 23rd, 1669, at Quebec City, they were married. And so they would settle at a town called Neuville, which actually means new town, by the way. It is one of the oldest settlements in New France, and it's located about 30 kilometers west of Quebec City along the St. Lawrence River. Absolutely beautiful. My husband and I stayed here a few years ago, and I was just entranced. It really was kind of like stepping back in time. Beautiful village. In 1653, the area was granted as a seigneurie by Jean de Lauzon to Jean Bourdon de Saint-Jean for his son, Jean-François Bourdon de Daubourg. Now, in 1680, the Daubourg seigneurie was acquired by Nicolas Dupont de Neuville. Thereafter, the seigneurie was known as Neuville. The reason why I go into all this complex, kind of who got where, when, is because in some earlier text, you will see Daubourg. Daubourg is Neuville before it became Neuville. So I wanted you to have that background. Many of the early settlers were from Normandy and Poitou, and they included farmers and craftsmen of Neuville. And there was many filles du roi who would settle at Neuville. In fact, it has one of the highest percentage of filles du roi among all of the, it's a small little town, and yet it rivals Quebec City and Montreal, And it was really an agricultural hub and supplied food to Quebec City and surroundings. Due to its location, Neuville was vulnerable, of course, to Iroquois raids in the late 1600s, like many other rural communities in New France. And despite these challenges, the town developed a strong Catholic identity with the first parish church, Saint Francois de Sales, built in 1684. Now, after the French conquest of Quebec or New France in 1759 1760. Neuville, of course, remained a francophone and Catholic town, although trade and economy had to adapt to British rule. And so this little town kind of stood its ground. And I would invite anyone who goes to Quebec to go through Neuville because you really will feel a slice of New France. So that here's where the story takes a little bit of a turn, or actually a big turn. But let's start with the children that came from this union. We have Isabelle Ursel, who would be born 1671. She would pass away after the 1681 census, would not leave descendants. And Antoine, he was born 1673, and he would absolutely leave descendants. He would be married to Anne Cloutier and Louise Tremblay. Now you'll note that the 1681 census does not have his parents, or in the case of Isabel, her parents. That's because both of these children were adopted or sent to other homes, which we will get to in a minute. But Isabelle is found in the household of Pierre and Jeanne Charon, and it says Elisabeth adoptée. And that is because Elisabeth is the other word for Isabel. So if you were named Isabel, you could also be named Elisabeth. So she's living with them. Her brother Antoine is living with Antoine Tepe and his family, and he is listed as Antoine Bouchot. And here's why. It appears that Catherine's husband would leave sometime after 1673. We do not know the reasons for this departure. And we don't really know which came first in the later problems. Were the problems that she had part of her solution to his leaving, or were the problems she had the reason why he left? Let's have a look. So let me take you back to a Monday morning in Quebec, August 19th, 1675. The Sovereign Council, the highest court in New France, wasn't dealing with land disputes or trade agreements. Nope. This was juicier. Two women merchants, they called them, Catherine Guichelin and Catherine Basset, had caught the council's attention, and not for their businesses. Catherine Guichelin, who is our main focus today, it seems has been granting her favors freely and without discrimination to not one but two men, Jean Aumier and Jacques Michelon. The council's verdict: she was banished from the city until her husband returned. If she dared set foot in Quebec again, she'd face the whip. The two men, they each got a 10-pound fine, a livre, and we will cover Catherine's fate in another episode, but Catherine's fate was similar. She too was expelled from the city. But here's where it gets interesting. Her lover, Catherine Basset's lover, was a man named Jean de Linon, Sœur de la Mirante, a gentleman, got off much more lightly. They just said to him, don't see her again, and that was that. Cases like this tell us so much about the moral code of the time and how justice wasn't always blind. In 17th century New France, the church and civil authorities worked hand in hand to maintain public virtue. And if you were wealthy or well connected, well, your punishments tended to be lighter. So really nothing has changed, has it, over hundreds of years? So the next time you think that our ancestors led quiet and pious lives in the colonies, remember these two ladies and that Monday morning when all of Quebec was buzzing. So let's see what Catherine does next. So Catherine would go on to have 5 more children, but not with her husband. So we have Pierre, who we do not have a father for. He would go on to marry Marie Chaubadier, and would have 7 children, 2 of whom would make it to adulthood. Marie's mother was a fille du roi, Marie Mercier, who we profiled in episode 151, which you can have a look at. The next child she would have, Catherine, Jean-François Turgot, and he was born in 1679. His father was François Turgot, but we don't have any other information about Jean-François. Marie Vacher was baptized Marie-Madeleine Givenchy, and she would marry Jacques Labosse de Labrosse, and they would have 2 children, both of whom would make it to adulthood. And then we have Marie Jeanne. All we know is that her mother was listed as Catherine. And then we have Marie Agathe, who married Francois Judic and would have 5 children, all of whom would make it to adulthood. Please, please, in the comments below, if you are a descendant of one of these quote unquote illegitimate children, please let me know if you are. I'm fascinated to know the history of it, because you could be a descendant of Catherine from her first husband, her son Antoine, or one of these children. So please let me know. So Catherine would somehow manage to put her life together, and she'd be a godmother for at least 5 children. And so that tells you that somehow she had, they wouldn't have allowed her back in the church to be a godmother if she was somehow a scandalous woman. Obviously had rehabilitated herself in New France's eyes. And she would go on to remarry. She married Charles Tissot de Saint-Germain, and in 1708, upon his passing away, she would marry Jean Roy de la Pensée. And, she was a woman who definitely liked being married, but also enjoyed being on her own, shall we say. Catherine would go on to live a very, very long life, dying at the age of 80. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? She had the fortitude to go through all of that, dying at the age of 80 in 1733, and she's buried at Saint-Wachim, and I believe that's where she was living with her third husband. It's just an incredible story. Are you tired yet? What a life story this woman had. Oh my gosh. I admire her. I know that she lived a life that probably bordered on some sort of immorality, but I don't really think so. I think that she was a woman ahead of her time and just did what she wanted to do and didn't really subscribe to the morality police of that time. She paid a price for it, of course, but ultimately I think that she was truly a woman that wanted to live on her own terms. Now, whether or not her husband left because of it or she responded in kind because he left, we don't know. But I think she was a very strong woman, and I admire strong women. So I admire Catherine. And in the end, I mean, she got married twice afterwards. She was, accepted by society, all of that in order to be a godmother and all that implies. So I think in the end, she became part of the New France experience and wasn't shunned and didn't leave the country and all of that, and somehow wrote it out, So kudos to Catherine. Thank you for showing us a different kind of life, and we are ever so grateful that you came to our shores, and we are thankful that you are one of those more exciting Filles du Roi stories. Thank you, Catherine. We bless you, and we bless your memory. And now I also want to say thank you to my patrons, supporters, and subscribers. You are truly amazing, and thank you so much. Over the last, I guess, few weeks or months, I've really started to see an uptick in subscribers, and that's amazing. My goal, let me share it with you today for the first time. My goal for this year is to get to 3,000 subscribers. I think I'm almost at 2,500 as I record this, and that's a place I never thought I'd be anyway. So thank you so very, very much. And with that being said, I will see you on the next episode of Les Filles du Roi. Until then, au revoir.